Good day. My name is Jake Ward. I'm Vice President for the University of Maine Office of Innovation and Economic Development. The University of Maine is the state of Maine land grant, sea grant, and space grant research institution. It's the largest public institution in the state of Maine. Today I'm going to cover our floating offshore wind project, New England Aqua Ventus 1, the first U.S. floating offshore wind project in the United States under the Department of Energy Advanced Technology Demonstration Program for offshore wind. I'm going to quickly cover the basics of our project, which we call the Monhegan Demonstration Project. It is a single turbine floating hull located in the Monhegan Energy Test Site. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you see a map with a green blob 2 miles south of Monhegan Island. That is a state-designated test site. It is in state waters, and there is specific legislation that allows us to do demonstration of floating offshore wind in that test site under state permitting. The cable that will run from Monhegan test site is approaching shore near Booth Bay Harbor, and it is currently an area that is being surveyed to identify the final location of the cable. Last summer of 2020, we announced a new partner in the project, a newly formed joint venture, New England Aqua Ventus, which is a joint venture of Diamond Offshore Wind, a Mitsubishi Corporation, and RWE Renewables. Together, they will own and operate the demonstration project under a 20-year power purchase agreement through the state of Maine, selling electricity into the grid through Central Maine Power. The University of Maine continues to be the design engineer developer for the project. On the picture, you can get a rough idea of what the dimensions are for the single hull that would be located in the Monhegan area test site. It is approximately 11 megawatt turbine at this point. It is the only floating offshore wind project in the Department of Energy's Advanced Technology Demonstration Program. Through the Department of Energy, the University of Maine has over 13 grants, a little over $20 million, with several grants still pending, to support the floating offshore wind research and development activities leading up to the project and the project itself. There's an additional $34 million approved by the Department of Energy for the construction of the Monhegan project. The University of Maine has also received many other grants in support of offshore wind, including the Economic Development Administration, the National Science Foundation, NIST, and the Maine Technology Institute. And we have lab partners working with the National Renewable Energy Lab, a DOE lab, Pacific Northwest National Lab, a DOE lab, the Army Corps of Engineers, Coal Regions Engineering Lab, and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Before I get to the details of the specific project, I think it's helpful to look at a little history of how the University of Maine offshore wind program was developed from a brainstorm to a state, national, internationally recognized program. I'd like to recognize Dr. Habib Dagher, the leader of this effort, getting back to 2006, 2007, really the mindset and persistence to grow a technology that could be incredibly viable for the economy and the environment in pursuit of our energy needs. Of course, the picture on the right-hand side is a well understood NREL diagram of wind speeds off the United States, demonstrating where the highest winds are that would support offshore wind. We have to look back in a little bit of history. In 2006, Maine was facing a crisis. Oil was moving toward $4 a gallon, all imported, and about $4 to $6 billion a year in energy expenses were leaving the state. This is compared to an annual state budget of about $3 billion a year. The solution that we were looking for was energy that could be generated locally, reducing our dependence on imported energy, a need for renewable energy resource, as Maine does not have natural resources in oil and gas. Gulf of Maine is the offshore wind, is Maine's largest untapped resource and an alternate to imported fuels. And we need an energy source to meet the expanding energy demand at the same time replacing aging electricity plants. We needed a solution that was good for the economy. Not only locally produce energy, but if we could locally manufacture components, we can create economic opportunity and local jobs while stabilizing energy prices. And of course, we need to pay attention to the environment. We need an energy source that will reduce pollution, that is currently impacting the environment and something better than the other alternatives. I put together a little bit of a timeline to show that this is taking quite a bit of time. Anybody who's been doing any type of renewable energy development understands the long timelines involved, but especially when you're bringing a new technology from the invention stage to commercial deployment. It all starts back in 2006, 2007, when Matt Simmons, who was a Texas oil and gas person, decided that seeking ocean energy out of the Gulf of Maine was an important opportunity for future energy needs. He created the Ocean Energy Institute, and then through working with his executive director, George Hart, and Habib Dagger from the University of Maine, they began exploring all the energy opportunities that could come from the ocean, and decided through that evaluation that offshore wind had the highest potential to have a consistent source of energy. Through that initial stage, and education and outreach throughout the state, in 2008, the Maine governor formed the Ocean Energy Task Force and established state energy goals for offshore wind. And that is really the beginning of the offshore wind effort in the state of Maine. Through that, you can see a series of events that go anywhere from our 1/50th scale model testing in the Netherlands through the various and assorted legislation that created the test site, created a power purchase agreement for demonstration. We have our invention of the Volturnus hull, I'll go into in a little bit detail in a little bit. The opportunity for a power purchase agreement through the Maine PUC, the formation of Maine Aqua Ventus as a private company to do development, a series of Department of Energy grants through the Advanced Technology Demonstration Program, additional work in Monhegan to get the residents to take a community benefit agreement, and finally, the final PPA contract and the joining of New England Aqua Ventus at the current stage to actually build the project. The color coding on this represents the leaders in the effort, whether it was Maine, the state of Maine, the Department of Energy, or New England Aqua Ventus. Of course, it takes a lot of talent to go through these types of developments. We have dozens of UMaine faculty, staff, and students from all different disciplines participating in it. Undergraduate students have had jobs working in the labs, doing capstone projects from all the different disciplines. Graduate students have master's theses, and we have PhD students as well. All the disciplines have been in teams, so it's really a research learning experience. In addition, we have had statewide K-12 outreach and programs like our Windblade and Windstorm challenges. These are design engineering challenges that are offered through late middle school through high school every year, typically about 350 to 400 students participating prior to the pandemic. Plus, of course, as the University of Maine, we have a variety of support functions throughout the system in order to do a development of this scale. In addition, we have partners and collaborations. From day one, we've had over 30 plus businesses, vendors, contractors on everything from the environmental, electrical, construction, permitting, law firms, of course. NGOs and nonprofits have participated, and we have worked directly with towns and communities where there is opportunities to have activity and grow and support their communities. And of course, we have state agencies involved from all the different disciplines, from the Governor's Energy Office, Governor's Policy Office, Economic Community Development, Transportation, Marine Resources, Environmental Protection, Inland Fish and Wildlife, and not to mention Maine Historic Preservation Society, Bureau of Submerged Lands, all the different elements of these that are important to the development of this type. And we've had continuous leadership and support at all levels. This project has spanned 4 University of Maine presidents, 3 University of Maine system chancellors, 3 University of Maine VPs for research. We've had unwavering support from our delegation throughout the whole thing. And then spanning over a decade, 3 Maine governors, 6 Maine legislators, and we've had legislation in just about every session of the legislature, and 3 US presidents, 5 secretaries of energy, and we're fortunate that we are still pursuing this. Of course, innovation is a center to all of this. This project revolves around our Volturnus hull, which is the floating concrete hull. We have 46 US and foreign patents on the construction methods, mooring systems, our LiDAR buoy, control systems, et cetera, that lead to the development of this. And of course, many publications, including, for example, I've listed a reference to the model test publication for our 1/8 scale, which was launched off of the coast of Castine for 14 months. This is a highly desired publication and one of the most downloaded around offshore wind. And then over the decades, we've built infrastructure that gives us unique capabilities to work in the offshore wind space. We have our W2 wind wave basin, which is a wave tank with a wind tunnel over the top of it. It allows us to do wind wave modeling at 1/50th scale, but have also done modeling for other types of wave energy generation devices, ship hulls, models, things like that. We also have our offshore wind lab, where we have a full-scale blade testing capacity. Our Monhegan test site is really a unique site in the fact that we have a site that's now been established over 10 years, and we have 10 years of environmental data monitoring. It's one of the most heavily monitored sites in the state and one of the most understood pieces of water. We've had a historic use of our, what was formerly Gulf of Maine Ocean Observation System, ocean observation monitoring buoys throughout the Gulf of Maine as part of the Syracuse and Iowa systems, continue to give us a long history of mid-ocean conditions and the ability to do spot location as necessary. All of that, and we need to answer the question, with 3% of the Gulf of Maine offshore wind resource, we can electrify Maine's heating and transportation at about 5 gigawatts. So it doesn't need the whole Gulf of Maine, we just need 3% of that energy in order to meet that demand. So how are we going to do that? Well, NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, in a recent study determined that Maine leads in the economic potential for offshore wind along the East Coast, with up to 65 gigawatts of power available in the Gulf of Maine to support Maine. And this is the ranking of the New England states by the Northeast states, by the availability of gigawatts and the economic potential to get that. This is not lost on our recent governor, Governor Janet Mills, who has taken some bold action to support climate goals in order to get to carbon neutrality and 100% renewable energy over the next 20, 30 years. These fundamentally led her through executive order to create the Maine Offshore Wind Initiative. This is a link to their webpage, and you can see the variety of information that they've already started in launching to make offshore wind part of Maine's future. The overall plan starts in 2013 with all the work that the University of Maine has been doing on our technology and modeling and demonstrating it at the 1/8 scale pilot project, which was located in Castine over 2013-2014. The next phase, as we've been talking about, the Monhegan project hopes to be launched in 2023, still subject to permitting, would be the single 11 megawatt turbine. And from all that, we will learn and be able to now pursue a research array of about 12 turbines or less that the state would apply to for a lease through BOEM. Using all that information, we hope to inform the potential for commercial development in the Gulf of Maine for responsible development and coexistence of commercial farms to support the energy and economic needs of the region. All this has been integrated into many of the state's strategic objectives. The recently published Maine Economic Development Strategy, is a 10-year strategy, makes offshore wind a potential for the future of Maine's economy, recognizing the nearly $70 billion in revenue opportunity in the next decade. In addition, Maine's Clean Energy Economy Plan, a plan to electrify energy in the state of Maine and transition away from fossil fuels, is heavily dependent on offshore wind as a component of renewable energy, along with land-based wind and solar and hydroelectric. And the Maine Climate Action Plan, which was recently released, has specific goals for growing Maine's offshore wind as a clean energy opportunity in support of Maine's climate and the environment. But we're not alone, and obviously many of you know that. This figure, well used, represents the variety of offshore wind projects that are in development stages consideration up and down the Northeast. I want to recognize right here that Maine is the only one that is looking at floating at this point. All the rest of these projects are fixed bottom technology, but they all also recognize that each state has goals for renewable energy and offshore wind meeting that renewable energy goal. And so it is part of the characteristic of the Northeast at this time to pursue the offshore wind. And of course, the federal government, the new Biden administration, has also taken a leap forward by ambitious goals for offshore wind and recently announced investments that would support the development of offshore wind throughout the country. So I'm going to go back and start talking a little bit more about the actual technology in our project. Once again, this is a floating concrete hull supporting a turbine. This is a commercially available turbine. Right now, the sweet spot in size is in this 10 to 12 megawatt range, though new turbines have been announced that would be approaching 15 megawatts. When we started all this back in around 2010, 2013, a 6 megawatt turbine was the leading edge turbine, and you can see how rapidly turbine development is going, and which allows us to have fewer turbines in the water, increase the amount of energy per installation, and decrease the cost of electricity. Once again, the Monhegan test site is located off of Monhegan Island. It's about 2.5 miles south of Monhegan. That site was picked through an extensive statewide project back in 2009 and assigned to the University of Maine as our offshore wind area test site. The state permitting to put a device in the water is specific to that test site and does not require BOEM leases. The floating technology in this case is a semi-submersible hull that supports the turbine. It is moored to the seabed using anchor chains. This describes the catenary load of the anchor chain that would then have a ground chain that leads to an embedment anchor. There are 3 mooring lines, one under each one of these columns, to keep the floating turbine on site. The size and shape of the mooring depends on water depth. The Monhegan site is roughly 300 feet, so we're designing a mooring system to look at that. Again, we're trying to target a LCOE that is competitive, and the 2020 NREL report suggests that we can get to lower than 6 cents a kilowatt hour. That's based on their independent economic analysis. Major component of it is local industrialized concrete bridge construction. Being able to build the components locally, domestically, and not importing large steel structures is the benefit to the economy in creating jobs. This technology can be built and floated dockside in 8 to 9 meters, or roughly 30 feet of water. And so many sites suitable for installation and demonstration deployment around the United States, wherever floating has an opportunity. And the other components are all relative to the design and allowing a structure to survive in the Gulf of Maine, the type of storms that we would normally see, and still produce the maximum amount of energy in a given year. This has all been approved by ABS through their standards of approval for floating offshore wind. When we talk about construction of precast segmental concrete as similar to building a bridge, we look at the stacked components. These are all precast concrete components that can be post-tensioned and assembled, very similar to the way the columns and the deck of a precast concrete bridge is. And specifically, here's a picture of the Sarah Long Bridge, which is the new bridge that was installed between Maine and Kittery the last few years. And you can see the size and scope of the precast components that are then stacked and assembled on the water. The benefit of our design for offshore wind is we don't have to do it out in the middle of the water, because everything can be done onshore or shoreside. So really reducing the in-water cost of an offshore construction. We've also begun laying out the potential for a serialized, industrialized manufacturing plant. This is a rough layout of how to create a facility that could do precasting of individual components, have them delivered to an assembly location, and then one by one assemble the towers and erect the turbines before being floated out. Here's another view of the simulation. When we get to industrialization, then what the goal is to have all of these assets working essentially 24/7, much like an automotive factory. So the cranes, the facility, all the capital investment in the facility is utilized and maximized for the production of the units. And for any type of renewable energy project, the CapEx, cost to build the units and install them, really drives the cost of energy. So the Volturnus floating wind floating technology can access about 51% of the US capacity of offshore wind. This map outlines in red, where the potential for floating is because of water depth and also relative position to the population base. So you can see the most heavily populated areas are also in proximity to floating offshore wind. Many of these sites are not suitable for bottom-mounted technology due to their proximity to the shore and the potential for interaction with other stakeholders that are operating close to shore. When we move into the Northeast, we see that 60% of the available wind is in a floating regime, and when we move into New England itself, we see 73%. For the Gulf of Maine, we do not perceive that there will be fixed bottom opportunities because of the deep water near shore and the need for most people to have offshore wind beyond the horizon or beyond the view shed. And also moving further offshore minimizes or reduces the impact with the heavily fished areas that are near shore. We've identified 1,600 plus ports in the United States that have 30-foot water depth or greater. As I said before, 30-foot water at the dock allows you to build and deploy the hull for construction and deployment. There's plenty of opportunities for construction around the United States in areas where there is floating potential. So what are the ongoing challenges? Why do the three phases matter? We talk about the 1/8 scale being the starting phase, the single unit in Monhegan being the scale up, and then moving towards a research array and eventually a commercial development. What we know, what we've learned so far from Castine is being integrated into the single unit at Monhegan. Once we have the single unit at Monhegan, we'll learn more about full-scale manufacturing. We'll learn about fishing around a single turbine, and we'll look at the impact on the environment. In particular, the Monhegan test site is located in the Monhegan Conservation Zone for lobstering. It is limited to lobster fishermen who live on Monhegan Island and capped at 17 fishermen per year. So the availability to work directly with Monhegan fishermen and really understand how fishing around a floating structure can be done, primarily fixed gear lobstering, will give us an opportunity to then prescribe best practices for a larger array. In addition, we'll be monitoring every element of the environmental ecological interaction, so we have a better understanding of how every element of it has interfaces with the environment. From the anchor lines on the bottom, the cable running to shore, the anchor lines suspended in the water column, the floating hull itself, the tower and turbine in the environment, whether it's birds or bats, all the fishes, marine mammals, bottom-dwelling creatures such as lobsters and crabs, will have a good assessment of how they live and interact in that environment. While there's a lot of information on how these interactions happen with fixed bottom technology in Europe and the beginning of the Block Island, floating presents a different opportunity altogether, and evaluating floating in this environment will be very important. We'll take that information and use it to inform the siting and design and layout of this to scale to the 10 to 12 unit research array. We're already looking at the available information to inform the state on siting and location, and thinking through how a research array would be oriented and set up to evaluate multi-turbine farms. Advantages of having this information now and leading into a BOEM multi-year lease process allows us to shape the future of the research array. And indeed, as we move into operation of the research array, we'll have more information to inform future commercial scale developments. So the big question is, can stakeholders coexist? We really are looking at the interaction between the technology, social and economic factors, especially commercial fishing, the environmental and ecological factors, especially endangered species, marine mammals, and really understanding that coexistence is a benefit for everybody, the environment, the economy, as well as stakeholders. For the Monhegan project, we're dealing directly with state permitting, and it's very prescribed for that site. The information and requirements of state permitting are through the Public Law Chapter 270, which you can find at this link. And it talks about all the requirements that we have to do, all the plans, the pre-construction plans, post-construction monitoring, all of that information. As I said before, the Monhegan site has been heavily studied to date. We began monitoring and collecting data back in 2009, and we've done studies on all of these different aspects of it. And all the results of any of these studies have been made available to the public. We know there's still additional studies that we have to do, especially since in the last 2 years, we've converted from what was originally a 2-turbine project to a single larger turbine. We have to update visualization and noise studies in particular. Our new partner at New England Aqua Ventus is now in charge of those development activities, and will be continuing to share that information with the public on the types of studies, the timing of the studies, and additional public meetings as needed. All of our information that we have shared publicly has been shared not only on our own website, but on the Monhegan Energy website, which is a site maintained by the Monhegan Energy Task Force. And this is a list of the studies that have been done to date, and those are all published. Plus, going forward, we're currently in the development of the Fish and Wildlife Monitoring Plan, as well as navigation and safety plan and decommissioning plans that have to be reviewed by the public agencies before we can submit applications. Of course, stakeholder outreach is critically important and continues to be a challenge, especially when we talk about stakeholders who are very passionate about their current use of the existing resources. Our stakeholder outreach on floating offshore wind began back in 2009 when the state of Maine, after approving the law for the test site, went through an extensive series of activities to evaluate potential test sites in the state of Maine waters, initially looking at the whole coast of Maine within the 3 miles, and by elimination, narrowing it down to the final 3 test sites that were established in December 2009. Over 37 public sessions and hundreds of participants, and all those sessions included mapping exercises where fishermen were given charts with potential areas for test sites and asked to X in or X out boxes where they thought things should be located. That's how the Monhegan test site was selected, and it was assigned to the University of Maine. Another aspect of the Monhegan test site is that it is 14 miles offshore, so the view from the land is greater than the 3-mile line because the state waters extend 3 miles around the islands. It is located on the backside of the island where there is very little view shed from existing residents. I believe there's 3 residents that have direct views of it. And it also has the limitation of the number of fishermen, as I explained earlier. In 2010, 2011, in partnership with our Maine Sea Grant program, we held community presentations on the test site, plus numerous one-to-one meetings and conversations, primarily in the Monhegan area to the towns on the north, St. George, on the south, the Booth Bay area peninsula. These also included mapping exercises with fishing in the area between Monhegan test site and the main line, so that we have a better sense of where we can lay the cable. All of those mapping exercises results in charts where known fishing areas, tows, primarily dragging tows, were identified, so that if we could find a cable pathway that would avoid the draggers. In addition, 2013, Maine Sea Grant, working together, held over 40 public meetings, and many with one-to-one fishermen on the test site in the region, and included additional updating of the the fishing maps. From 2014 to 2021, the University of Maine and Maine Aqua Ventus, our company that we started to do this development, established a communication strategy with the residents of Monhegan through what was formed the Monhegan Energy Task Force. This was set up so that we could provide a good communication pathway with the community of Monhegan, as previous efforts had been unsuccessful, and there were many missteps on our side by not uniformly informing all the residents. MEDIF was a great opportunity to solve that problem, and thus since 2014, January 2014, we've had nearly weekly calls. There's been periods where we've gone 6 months without a call. At this point, we're about weekly again with representatives from the Monhegan Energy Task Force, and they maintain a website where we share all the information about the project as well. We've also co-hosted dozens of public workshops and seminars, and over the last year, we were actually using Zoom and other types of video conferencing for years because so many residents cannot get to meetings, and summer residents who are around the country are not available to attend in person. In 2017, we brought on a new fisheries liaison, particularly as we started to move forward with looking at the cable right away and whether how to do the survey. And again, there was a regular attendance of meetings and additional presentations and one-on-one with many of the fishermen who had been identified in the region through some of the earlier sessions to get their information and their update. In addition, the Department of Energy, NEPA, held the first 2 scoping sessions on the project. Beginning in January 2018, as we were unable to get a cable survey launched in 2017 due to many factors, we again began to pursue a cable survey through Booth Bay, and again had many public and private meetings. We had a new fisheries liaison person who worked out of the Booth Bay area and had not only public session, but many one-to-one meetings in that short time period. Jumping ahead to December 2019 is when BOEM and established the Gulf of Maine Task Force, and Governor Mills announced the new offshore wind initiative. And then the state began doing their own outreach around offshore wind. And then when New England Aqua Ventus started in the summer of 2020 and taking over the development role of the project on Monhegan, they've also been doing their own outreach and have picked up where we left off, the Monhegan area, the Cable Survey region, the Booth Bay area, working directly with fishing associations as well as locals. They just completed the Cable Survey last week. These are just some pictures of the many different types of publications and posters and fact sheets that we've put out on all the different topics, that questions that have come up. We have frequently asked questions documents, and have to say that they're not dissimilar to many of the questions I'm sure that many of you experience on a regular basis, whether it's birds and bats, acoustics, cable and EMF, cable bearing, visualization, all the issues that people are concerned about with offshore wind. We try to address them with science and fact. We try to address them with the best information we have available, and we try to admit where we don't know all the details as they are today. One of the challenges in that type of approach is that when we started this project back in 2013 with 2 6-megawatt turbines, there's been a lot of incremental changes and changes to the program over the years, and continuous evolution and innovation that facts on turbines in 2013 may not be the same size and shape as they are today. We've been totally committed to being transparent and working directly with the fishermen. I know you can't read these in this scale, but these are our commitments to the fishing industry, including committing to only working with developers who will sit down and engage with fishermen, including not licensing our technology to any projects that would be closer than 20 nautical miles to the, I actually believe it's 15 nautical miles to the shore. Already our partner, New England Aqua Ventus, is committing to 20 miles. We've done extensive updates on the project on a regular basis, and again, share all of these information as publicly as we can. And to that point, for more information, here's the links to the sites where much of this information resides, and it is often redundant and located in many different sites. The University of Maine Advanced Structures and Composite Center Offshore Wind Program site, the Monhegan Energy Task Force site, Maine Aqua Ventus as the company we formed to be the developer, New England Aqua Ventus, who has taken over the role of Maine Aqua Ventus, and then Maine's Governor's Energy Office on Offshore Wind Initiative. Additionally, there is a tremendous amount of information from the recent Afloat 2020 conference. That's a technical summit. It's an internationally recognized summit that was held this past October as a virtual event. Again, I understand that you can't really read these speakers, and you may recognize some of them, including folks from BOEM and the Department of Energy. All of these sessions were recorded, and they're available at this website, and as is information coming forward for the Afloat 2021 conference, which right now is scheduled for July 7th to 9th in Bar Harbor. It hopes to be an in-person conference as we emerge from the pandemic and people are starting to think about summer in Maine again. I strongly encourage you to read, if you're interested in any of the technology, outreach, permitting, all of the aspects of floating offshore wind. The 8 hours of session recordings really cover that in great detail. So with that, I'm going to end right now. There's a tremendous amount of information. I appreciate your patience as I've walked through this. If indeed there is additional information needed or more conversations that people want, feel free to reach out to me. Many of our team are doing public workshop sessions, seminars on a daily, weekly basis, and we have experts in all of the fields. We have legal and permitting experts, we have environmental ecological experts, we have science and engineering and technology, construction experts. We've done work on tourism studies, we've done work on visualization, we have all the aspects of a development through the lens of a university as well as our partners. Be happy to establish times for a deeper discussion on any of these elements and are continue to look for opportunities to use floating offshore wind to support a nation of clean energy. Thank you very much.